Good afternoon and welcome to the June 23rd Oklahoma City Planning Commission meeting. If you have cell phones, pagers, or similar devices, if you would turn those off or silence them now, we would appreciate you doing that for us. If you are not the applicant and you have come to address us on a case today, there are sign-up sheets. They look like this. They're on the table right outside the chambers. And we'd be happy to hear you when we hear the case. And with that, we'll go to receiving the minutes of our last meeting, June 9th.
Move to receive the minutes.
We have a motion and a second to receive the minutes. Cast your votes. And that is approved. And we'll now go to continuance requests.
We do not have any uncontested requests for continuance, but we do have 4 new requests, which are items B19 on your agenda for CPA 2016-2 to defer that to July 14th. Item B20 on your agenda for case PUD 1614 to defer to July 14th. Item B21 for case CE 933 to defer to December 8th. And item B22 for a de-annexation request 2016-1 to withdraw.
Anyone come today to talk to us about any of the cases just read? We have a motion and a second to approve the continuances. Cast your votes. Are there any continuance requests from the public today? Well, we'll go to the consent docket.
We have 5 items on the consent docket today. There would be item 1 is case PV 097. Item 2 is case PC 10-456. Item 3 is case CE 936. Item 4 is case CE 932. And item 5 is C-6825. And I might add a note here that the requested variance that we would have been voting on is now going to be deleted from that, so it's no longer required. Okay. And that's why it's on the consent docket.
Anyone come today to talk to us about items 1 through 5 on our agenda?
Mr. Chairman, I have a comment on number 2. I'd like to put it the first of the meeting.
Okay, we'll have a motion to approve the consent docket, items 1, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the consent docket, deleting item 2. Cast your votes. And there we are. Item 2 then will be heard in order. Here we go.
Item 2 is case PC 10-456. This is an application to rezone 3000 South Council from I-3 to I-2.
I'm not going to vote against the application, but this is an example of, I think, what Jim Allen said at some time about being careful about just coming in and agreeing to rezone something from A to B, whatever it is, and I agree that this is surrounded by I-3, etc. I don't know what goes on in the neighborhood, but I mean, Buck, you may know this better, a lot better than I. But when you go from an I-3 to an I-2, that's great, but this applicant, and it could be any applicant, just coming in straight down zoning is now subject to an I-2 zoning regime, which anticipates 50-foot signs, anticipates whatever industrial landscaping, anticipates all manner of things. And I think that we need to be cautious about just granting a downzoning when actually, and this is back perhaps to the planning department, maybe suggest that whenever this happens, as they come in with an SPUD and tell us what's going to happen on that particular lot, because you can just anticipate whatever I-2 allows, it allows, and it's a 7-Eleven store. They need to have the downzoning to do a convenience store, and at that point, I think that we really have to be cognizant of what that might happen and how that might denigrate the neighborhood if, in fact, it gentrifies. In fact, it does better than I-2, I-3. And that's just an editorial comment, and so I'll move approval of the application with that comment.
Motion and second to approve item 2. Cast your votes, and it's approved.
Item 6 is case PUD 1615 to rezone 2609 North May from R1 and C3 to PUD 1615.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, my name is Joe Covey. I'm here on behalf of the applicant for this PUD. I'm sure all of you know where Taft Stadium is. Taft Stadium is now the home of the Oklahoma City Energy Football Club. What we're attempting to do is put a PUD in place that allows them the sale of alcohol, beer, wine, but only limited to the stadium portion and not the east 120 feet of the site. For a little bit of history, as you all probably know, over the last couple of years, this stadium has gone under major renovation. It was totally gutted except for the rock wall on the east side of it. They went in and reduced the number of seats from what I understand when it was built in 1934 was 18,000 seats. It was reduced down to 7,000 seats. They have a 17-game schedule that has already started. They have been playing for the last 2 years at Bishop McGinnis High School. They're now playing here, and they've been operating on special permits for their alcoholic beverage sales and their memorabilia sales, and have, in good faith, they have been asked to, over the last year or so, to make these permanent, and that's what we are attempting to do. We use the R1 district because it had the minimum uses in it, and we added the 2 uses that we needed to succeed in what we are attempting to do. The landscaping, the parking has received variances from the Board of Adjustment to allow them to use the Northwest Classen High School's parking area. And they also have agreements with a church to the south to use their parking area to have enough parking to handle the seating that is required of them. At this point, we met with the staff yesterday to clarify some of the TEs regarding signage, alcoholic beverage, and the sale of that alcoholic beverage. I think JJ has submitted to you the revisions that we agreed to on TEs 9, 11, and 12. If you have any specific questions, I would be happy to answer them or to address them.
Mr. Covey, I do have some questions. You met also with Commissioner Powers and possibly Commissioner Bright, is that correct? Just Commissioner Powers? And there was some modifications or suggested language to the TEs you just described?
Yes.
And I understand that information was shared with you before the meeting?
Yes.
Do you have a problem with any of the
No, we helped draft those. We went back and forth a few times this
I'm
morning.
talking about what was contained in the emails that you were shown before the meeting.
Specifically, the TEs that we have suggested for the signage coming back to us through a specific plan, the limitation of the alcohol to beer and wine, and the limitation of that to certain activities. And I think there probably will be a little bit of discussion about that point. But we asked the staff to draft something that would indicate that that use would be entirely ancillary to the use of the stadium for sporting events and or entertainments. And so you've seen those?
Yes, I've got them in my hand.
You're okay with that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I'm not sure he's looking at what we're looking at.
I think he is. Here, come look, make sure. I don't think so. I think we've got the same thing.
The point is that the use you're looking for, the ABC kind of use you're looking for, should be accessory to the sporting events that will occur as a result of the football franchise that's there. I would not like to see Taft Stadium become some kind of a special events center as opposed to serving these alcoholic beverages in conjunction with those specific scheduled sporting events.
And as long as we hold an able license for that facility, there can't be anyone else go out and get a special event license for that location.
Well, that doesn't mean you don't have a special events license, does it?
No, that means we would have an ABC license to sell beer and wine on site, but we could not go back and with any venue that comes in there, a concert or something like that, our ABC license would take care of that. It would be issued for the site and not for a special event.
Well, Dan, can you help me here?
Scobie, is that they want limited to the Energy's games, not other special events that may be put on by the Energy.
Well, the Energy in and of itself, yes, will be using it for their soccer games. But if they want to have a concert or another type of activity there, as long as they hold that license and as long as they get able approval, I don't see why they couldn't come in and have that type of activity there. There's other uses that can bring in revenue, if you will, that will help the school board as well as the Energy football club. But to have to go back, that's the reason we're here now, is to keep from having to have special event license for the Energy soccer club.
I think it's a slippery slope if we start turning our high school sports facilities into special event centers serving alcohol.
I have a threshold question.
All right.
Who funded the renovation?
It was
It
done.
says in the application it was a MAPS project.
It was done as part of MAPS program, but
Which MAPS program? MAPS
MAPS
for
3 is
kids?
what I understood.
Was it MAPS for kids?
Yes. But it was not the money, none of the money came out of the MAPS program. It was all done by a new
It was a
2007
MAPS
bond
for
issue.
kids funded renovation,
Oh.
and you want an ABC2 license to cover your soccer games, concerts. That's so inappropriate to me for a school-funded project. I can't believe it. I mean, I really can't believe. The applicant, you guys are the lessor, right?
Correct.
The lessee.
Lessee.
And the school board is the lessor?
Yes, sir. They're the one that signed the contract.
Well, this is, MAPS for Kids is supposed to be benefiting MAPS for Kids. And if you think that the revenues and the profits that your client is going to make off of this activity with a lease payment, I'd like to see what the lease agreement says between your guy and the school board. Do they get an override on what revenues there are? I mean, is there a percentage of the gross receipts from the activities?
I don't know. I haven't read the contract. All I know is they have a contract with the school board to lease this facility to the Energy.
For any purpose whatsoever?
No, the school board, if they want to do something else, the school board has to approve it.
And therein lies the issue about, I mean, I wouldn't object to beer and wine being sold at the Energy games.
Okay?
Beyond that, any other concert or other entertainment venue on a school property next to Taft Stadium and just to the east of a neighborhood that's just trying to, be a great, nice neighborhood, and you're having beer and wine for this forever, I will not agree to that and think it's totally inappropriate to even ask. Again,
Absolutely.
I understand the Energy's there, beer and wine sales for a soccer game. We've approved that for other soccer facilities, et cetera. But a blanket ABC2 overlay with anything you guys want to do, if that's what you're asking, my vote is a really resounding no.
Okay. Let me back up just a little bit. None of the money that went to renovate this was taken out of the MAPS for Kids 3. It was done as a part of the MAPS for Kids, but the money was out of a 2007 school bond issue to renovate this and Spiegel Stadium. They spent about $9 million on this one. They reduced the seating by about 11,000 people. It is still used by John Marshall and, as I understand it, Northwest Classen High School for their football games and all their activities. So it's not strictly used by by the energy. But as we put in the TE, the alcohol and wine sales could not be taken or could not take place during school-type functions. We don't want people with the watching a high school football game having beer and wine in the stands. Energy is a different situation.
Janice?
I think, this was part of our discussion previously, and I think this really sort of is maybe the sticking point. My sense from talking to the applicant and also to Mr. Wright is that there probably is support for the idea of there being service of wine and beer at energy events. The question is, and to be fair to the applicant, they haven't tried to, hide this. I think that there is a genuine desire for the site to become more of an events center. They want to preserve the ability to use it for things like concerts, other events, and that sort of thing. And they do want to be able to serve wine and beer at those events as well. And in fact, they have talked about the possibility of seeking additional change to the PUD in the future, perhaps, in order to allow the service of alcohol. Because once they have an ABC overlay, they can't then go get a special events licensing just for a party. But so, to us, it comes down to, is there a way that we can narrow and craft the ability for them to serve wine and alcohol in a way that's acceptable to us and to them? And I think the pivot point on that is whether or not the facility is going to be a place for the energy to play soccer, or whether it's going to become an event center, one use of which is that it's where the energy plays soccer. And I think that's the discussion that we need to focus on, because I really think that's kind of the crux of the question. My initial reaction to this application was, how is this even possible? I have not spoken to anybody at the school board. I have not looked at the lease. I don't know what authority it gives them or allows for these other events to be promoted. The signage that was part of that package, I think, of special events usage is kind of off the table today, because we've decided that they're not going to seek any additional signage at this time. When they do, they'll have to come back to the Planning Commission with a specific application for that. But I don't think that we can kid ourselves about what's really at issue here. And I think whether or not Taft Stadium is going to become a special event center is what's at stake.
But and so in the analysis of what your application is, the light bulb came on. The applicant is the lessee, and the lease is terminated. What happens to the ABC2?
Runs with the land.
It goes away, right?
No, it runs with the land.
How could it if the applicant isn't the owner of the land?
The way it always does when the applicant is not the owner of the land.
Yes. The zoning goes with the land.
Then therefore, I suggest that we defer this until we do what we're going to do at the end of the meeting on the ABC2 ordinance that's being proposed and everything else, is that we need to have that intact before another one of these come up.
I've given some thought to that too. What they're asking for is their underlying zoning is R1. So under our new scheme, they wouldn't be entitled to any kind of
with an ABC2 over 9 acres.
What I'm saying is they're going to keep their R1 in place.
With an ABC2 overlay.
Right, but under our new scheme for dealing with alcohol sales, they wouldn't be entitled even to apply, I don't think, for a special permit with an R1 zoning. So I don't have a strong feeling about whether we need to deal with it differently than we are here, but I think we need to be careful about how we do it, and I think we need to be honest with ourselves and with the applicant about what our expectations are. None, that I have not spoken to them.
Give us your name and address, please.
Ellen Spiropoulos, 3200 Northwest 20th Street. I'm an attorney for the applicant here today, and my practice is in alcohol-related law, not in zoning, so that's why Mr. Covey was kind enough to help us out today. But I think I can answer your questions. In the packet that we submitted with the application is an authorization voted on at a school board meeting authorizing this very application for the PUD. The lease was submitted with the application, and it contains the authorization for the service of alcohol at the events under the lease. And our concern here about the questions that Commissioner Bright raised, because we have the same concerns, is that we do not want this overlay application to prohibit the school from being able to decide that there are events that they would like to do, that they think are appropriate with alcohol, but are not a soccer game. Because once we put in permanent licensing, which we are being required to do, then you can't have special event licensing as well. The two are incompatible. And that's where the rub comes.
Excuse me, I'm not sure I understood what you just said.
Okay.
You said if the school decides to have an event, or if the...
Yeah. No other event other than soccer can be held there without the school board deciding that somebody comes to them and they say, that sounds like something we think would be appropriate at Taft. If the school district decides they want to do other events there, we have no authorization to do those other events without school district approval of those events. Our lease is for soccer.
That clarifies.
And I think that's a
understand.
legal point that I think Mr. Covey, as a surveyor, wasn't making clear to you.
Well,
Does that
Well,
help a little bit?
To the second point, though, that was helpful. But looking at this strictly from a land use standpoint, you have effectively a potential outdoor concert venue going into hard up against R1. Is that a land use? We'll just set aside all the other things. From a land use standpoint, is that a land use that you want? I get the energy. I'm supportive of that portion of the application because I don't view that as one that would be particularly obtrusive with respect of the. But I can promise you, if I lived on the east side of Denniston Park there, and those houses literally butt up right against the back part of that stadium. That wouldn't be very comfortable. There's residential over there across the street on 27th. So, I mean, there's nothing that says that the school has to, we're not going to get another shot with the school about what events they decide to do. Look, they need money.
But correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Brummett, I think we'd have to get a noise permit for any of those kinds of concert activities if they're not connected with a sporting event.
Special event permit, yes.
Mm-hmm. You'd have to get a regular city special event permit. You'd have to get a noise permit if you were going to have noise levels. So there's a permitting process in place as well as the safety net of the school. Because I understand what you're saying. I'm a resident of the area. I live on the other side of 23rd Street, a couple of blocks down the street. And so when you live in an urban area, absolutely, that is a concern here. But there was a lot of effort put into Taft, both by the bond issue and by the Energy Club, who's invested their money in the stadium as well. And I think there's an idea of trying to use it for more than 20 games out of the year.
I think, it seems to me that maybe the easy answer here is, if it's legally possible for us to do that, to limit, just as we're limiting it to beer and alcohol, to limit it to professional sporting events, period. If the school wants to throw concerts there, they can come and ask us for the approvals that they would need to do that.
Or you could make it, it's not an ABC overlay, it's included as a use permitted by right in the PUD.
Okay.
So you could limit that to only for athletic events. But having limited that, the school board could not then come back and say, we want to do something else.
They could if they
Then they have to
amended
come
it.
back in.
Right, they
No,
would
they
have to
can't.
come back to us.
They can't. They can come back, but they have to amend the PUD.
And that seems to me like the way to deal with it. I mean, if we're going to turn it into a special events center, then I think that's the way we need to look at it. If we're going to deal with it as a place for the energy to play soccer, then I think we should deal with it that way.
Well, I think that's where my confusion is, and I think you've clarified a bunch of it, because the lease between the school board and this outfit is for energy soccer games, period.
Correct.
This application by the lessee is for the whole thing. And they have no legal ability to ask for this. The school board would have to ask for it.
Well, my understanding is, as a tenant, and we consulted with staff multiple times since we've been out there at the facility about the best way to handle this. My understanding is that as a tenant, that we were entitled to ask for the ABC overlay, and that as long as you had the authorization of the owner of the property, which we do, because they've signed on to, essentially, our application by specifically authorizing it, that then it becomes an application, essentially, of both parties when you're doing it.
That is correct, Bob. I mean,
And I don't have any problem with them asking for the uses that they want to make of it, but what they're also trying to do is preserve the school board's ability to make other uses of it should they so choose, and that's the part I'm having a problem with, because we won't have a look at that. So I think if we want to limit it to, and if we can limit it strictly to the events by this lessee, I'd be all in favor of that. But if we can limit it to professional sporting events, then fine. I mean, however we can tighten it down. But if we grant it without any kind of limitation of that sort, then it is going to become a special event center.
You could approve it as an accessory use to a sporting event.
Can we limit it to professional sporting events?
sanctioned?
I'm
League
not sure
sanction?
what league and who
Yeah.
sanctions it.
I'm not concerned about that. I wouldn't want it necessarily to be allowed at well, I'm just going to say amateur sporting events, but again, we've specifically prohibited any school-related activities. So, if you are amenable to having it limited to as an accessory use to sporting events, then I think that would probably solve most of the concerns that I'm hearing.
I don't think it can solve anything.
I don't either.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to argue with you, but it seems like Bob's concerns go beyond just sporting events. The zoo amphitheater.
I would vote in favor of an application excluding any kind of signage, throw that out of there, to have beer and wine sales at a professional soccer league games at Taft Stadium. I don't think there's anything really significantly wrong with that. It's okay. That's how many games? 17? 17 times. You know, there's, and they have them already. There's lights going on and music and sound. But when you have this application that covers, God, you name the rock and roll band or you name whatever it is, and you've got beer and wine sales with a lot of young folks that are sitting there doing stuff, I will not vote for that. And for a lot of reasons, not the least of which, this is a Maps for Kids project. It's inappropriate that we have an entertainment venue in this area, like Mike said. There's the Denniston neighborhood, I know it like the back of my hand, and just to the north. And then you have Taft Junior High School, Northwest Classen. All of that, you put this kind of venue in the middle of that, you really, really do affect the entire neighborhood, including kind of where I live, too. Back in the day, I'll have to admit this, they did have stock car races.
We were talking about that yesterday.
And you heard the roar. Thank God they took those away. But my objection to this isn't because you want to do the energy, beer and wine. It's the overall encompassing of everything, and I won't vote for it. I won't vote for it if we can't fix it. And then maybe, rather than, working on the definition of what it is that you limit the beer and wine sales to, maybe some little research, what can work with a limitation, unless you're sure of what it is already.
I'm not sure I have any idea.
Look, I think, if I could, I don't think we're going to get this solved in a manner today that really appeals to us and the applicant. Maybe we step back from this thing and work on it a little bit, because we're kind of engineering. We got a lot of folks interested in getting moving on to their matters, and I think we need to maybe step back, because I think this takes a little bit more engineering than what we're contemplating here at the Horseshoe. I just want to get it right.
How long does the temporary and special events license last?
Depends on how it's applied for.
Well, that's an interesting question. They're applied for each individual event. We have been doing that all of last year, because until the certificate of occupancy was granted for the property in February of this year, we had to use special events, because it's not available, permanent licensing, until the property is actually constructed and improved. So we've already been doing that for a year at the grace of the city licensing, of city police department, of zoning, and we've been doing it for this season as well, because we started on the zoning application as soon as the certificate of occupancy was granted. So there's no expiration date on anything. We'll continue to do what we are doing. We just, in good faith, have promised that we will try to get this done expeditiously to try to do that. So, obviously, we don't want to take up everyone's time doing this, but we also want to make sure that things that we do here don't adversely impact our landlord, the school district, and keep them from being able to make the full use out of the facility that they've invested in. Because I agree with you, it is a Maps for Kids project, and the funds that come from these outside events, all of that revenue that somebody pays to use that stadium, that goes right back into the schools. That goes back into Fields and Futures and the new sports facilities that are at Taft that have been built. No, not just the stadium, the new football practice field, all that stuff that's on 23rd Street. So, it's our goal to try to be a good tenant that makes this property something that the whole neighborhood can enjoy, and that the school district can use as a revenue generator as well.
When we met yesterday, it was clear that they were on a sort of a short time schedule. They've double noticed this. I was willing to accommodate that effort. But I have to say I agree with Commissioners Hensley. I think we need to take 2 weeks, look at this a little bit, maybe talk to the school board a little bit about what they're willing to live with, if they really need to preserve this possible future opportunity, then, whether there's a better way to deal with it.
And if they're doing if you're going to continue to do what you're doing, apply for special permits and do all of the police, fire, et cetera, go ahead. But you've got to really think about this application, and let's continue it.
And I think, frankly, the applicant's been put in a difficult position, because I think as a group, their proposed use is one that I personally don't have a lot of problem with. It's what your landlord intends to do, other than may intend to do, have no idea what they intend to do, and which is a bit frustrating, because I don't have them here to ask questions of.
Yeah, reading the tea leaves, you could get approved today for your application as an accessory use for your games.
I understand.
But I don't hear support for the balance.
I understand, and I would love to, and again, I don't know your process. I would love to be able to take a minute and talk to my client about what they would choose to do.
You can do that, and we would hear you at the heel of the docket. We're happy to do that.
Because, like Mr. Brummett, I don't know of a way to split this baby.
Yeah.
I've looked at it every which way in Title 37 and in our ordinances here for Oklahoma City, and a way to try to do what I understand that all of you are on board with. But at the same time, we don't want to do any harm.
And our next meeting is July 14th, which is really 3 weeks, I think, instead of 2, just because of the calendar.
Right, which then bumps us up against, we're already on the docket for the 19th for City Council. Again, with just trying to keep this moving so that we show that we're in good faith trying to get this done and not dragging our feet.
All right. Okay. We'll hear you again after the other cases. How's that?
Thank you. I appreciate it, Commissioner.
We don't need one. We don't need one.
Okay, then moving on to item 7, which is case SPUD 903 to rezone 5101 North Pennsylvania from R1 to SPUD 903.
Out with their equipment. Good Good afternoon, David Box, 522 Colcord Drive. Here on behalf of the applicant, Mr. Ryan McNeil, who's also with me, and Tim Johnson. What you have before you is an SPUD at the corner of Northwest Highway in Pennsylvania. This is a corner that I think for a long time has been underutilized. It's a corner that the new comprehensive plan calls for in the retail corridor. It's one that I think everybody for years has believed at some point would be some mix of retail and restaurant use, and that's what we have before you today. We have that application that we think will make great use of this site, put good use to the last corner that frankly has sit underdeveloped or undeveloped. In talking with several planning commission members, there were some things within the application in terms of uses and sign height that were requested of us. So at the beginning, I would like to say that we are in agreement to deleting the following 3 use units: the 8300.34 eating establishments drive-in, the 8300.45 and 46, those being the 2 gasoline sales use units. There are a handful of TEs, 3 of which we agree with. TE number 3 is one that I'm going to allow Mr. Johnson to address with the traffic. We are in receipt of the June 17th protest letter that was submitted, mostly dealing with traffic issues. I would like to focus just on one element of that and let Mr. Johnson focus on the details of it. The individual that did the study, when comparing what the site's currently zoned now as R1 to what we proposed in an SPUD for commercial development, it certainly seems like a significant leap. But I think everybody on this horseshoe would agree this site is not R1. There's no way that it would be appropriate to develop the corner of Northwest Highway and Penn as single family. So when you plug in R1, compare it to what we're going to C3, of course it looks significant. But I don't think that's the real test. I think the test is, let's all assume this is a commercial piece of property. What then can be done within the 4 corners of an SPUD document to ensure that the site is developed appropriately, appropriate buffers are put in place, appropriate measures for traffic are taken? We think we've done that. We think we have provided setbacks to the neighbors to the west. We think we have provided adequate circulation on our site. In addition to the access point on Northwest Highway, we do propose a deceleration lane coming into our site to help some of the traffic as they pull off Northwest Highway. And in addition, we have 2 access points onto Northwest 50th Street. As you travel northbound on Penn, there's not direct access onto 50th Street. There's a median there. But as you know, as you drive north on Penn, there is signage that the city has placed once you get to, I believe it's 47th Street, directing you to turn left right there, and that gets you through 47th to Barnes and up to 50th. So we believe that its signage is appropriate, the scaled back uses, the extra landscaping, the extra setbacks, all those things that we've provided in this SPUD will make this the best developed, nicest corner of that intersection. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions, but I would like Mr. Johnson to address the traffic issues.
David, before he does that,
Yes, sir.
Go over again with me the use units you're taking out.
Yes. We are taking out, and that's one other item I need to mention, 8300.34. That is the eating establishments drive-in.
Right.
8300.45 and 8300.46. Those 2 are the 2 gasoline sales. One other item of concern and conversation was the eating establishments fast food with drive-through order window. We thought long and hard about how to ensure that a Starbucks or some similar type of nice coffee shop that now utilizes a drive-through can go in, but prohibit what we all don't want, the typical fast food type restaurant on this site. The way that I think we can get there is limit the square footage of that building. The number that I spoke with my client about is the typical, and I hate to use Starbucks again, but that type of coffee shop are anywhere from 1,800 square feet and above 2,500. What we would propose, and what I've spoken to Commissioner Powers about, is that use unit will be permitted by right at 2,500 square feet or less. Anything above 2,500 square feet, we would be required to come back before the Planning Commission for approval, therefore ensuring that the type of uses that might be of concern aren't going to go on site. Short of that, again, I spent a lot of time, my client spent a lot of time, and I know several of you have, thinking how you can appropriately limit that without naming end users, which I think would be inappropriate, and I think the square footage gets us there.
David, are you agreeing to the 8-foot signs?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I've got a great argument as to why taller is better.
Then the other TE, I didn't understand, the way that the map looks and I don't know how your drive on Northwest Expressway aligns with the existing Barnes Avenue. I don't know how that works. That's a TE that I don't know where that came from.
I'll let Tim explain it. We don't think that provides what we need. What that would do, unfortunately, is it would throw our deceleration lane immediately behind our neighbors to the west.
The way I look at Barnes is over there on the neighborhood side.
Barnes would be right here.
Well,
That's where Barnes used to be, but the existing part of Barnes is over there.
oh, I was living at the Barnes Street way over.
Yeah. So this is Barnes, and then this is Barnes.
Oh.
And so that comment would put it here, and our concern is it doesn't make the site flow as well, and again, it puts a deceleration lane in somebody's backyard.
I don't think that that's even significant.
Yeah, I don't either.
Any other discussion? We'll hear Tim's explanation of
You
traffic.
can't match it to where Barnes
Good afternoon. Tim Johnson with Johnson & Associates. And to further discuss TE3 briefly is I respect the staff's concern and desire to, did I put that up? I appreciate the staff's concern and desire to move this drive to pull it further away from the left turn bays of the full operating intersection at Penn and Northwest Highway. We really don't want to promote anybody crossing that many lanes of traffic, and I think leaving it where we have it is logical from a standpoint, number one, it meets the current functional plan that Oklahoma City has. Number two, it's going to encourage these people to use alternate routes that I'm going to show you here in a minute. And number three, as David mentioned, putting the decel lane behind all the 6 or 7 houses to the west, we think would be problematic for those neighbors. So we would request that we be allowed to leave the drive where we indicated. One other thing, briefly, we put a lot of thought in this site plan and attempted to move these buildings as close to Northwest Highway as we could from a practical standpoint. You see this big open space here. That's to accommodate people coming in at a high speed off of Northwest Highway, being able to calm traffic down, circulate, and go to the venue that they want to go to. If we move this back here, it's going to force us to push that building south and put more parking in the front, because you can't fit the amount of lane depth for the exiting traffic in that area. We'd have to push more parking up front or move the building back at least, and it wouldn't be as functional as it is there. As you can see, we tried to just have one bay of traffic or parking, and we ended up with 2 over there just simply because putting the building up closer didn't make a lot of sense for the patio. So, all right, enough on TE3. And with response to the protest letter, which includes a lot of discussion about traffic, and with all due respect to former employee and colleague Todd Butler, who I have a lot of respect for, we just took a different look at this. I think if I had Todd's hat on, I'd be looking at the problems created by the condition that exists here today, which is before all of our time. Somebody decided to put a traffic signal at a private driveway, and as a result of that, people use that signal to cut through. In David's comment, this sign is a picture of the actual sign that's on the signal at 47th Street. I use Pennsylvania a lot. I live off of 50th Street, and I don't go and use that parking lot. I use 47th Street to Barnes and up to 50th Street. A lot of other people do as well. I think the thought that We designed this with the thought in mind that we would use private parking or private driveways as access, as not what we intended. What we show on here is legal access to the property, not utilizing the signalized parking lot that exists there. And you can see the flow of circulation. I won't bore you with all the details with it, but we feel like 40 to 50% of our traffic will come off of Northwest Highway as a flow-through or a drive-by. We've taken out 5 driveways in a public street on 50th Street and replaced it with 2. And we purposely spaced those away from their existing north driveway to offset it as far as possible. We also purposely designed the on-site parking lot layout to require a great amount of circulation to occur, a lot of lefts and rights to get through the parking lot to cut through. That was all purposeful in design. And the intent here is to force the users of this venue to use the public street access. And if I'm leaving here and want to go northbound on Pennsylvania, I can use Barnes and come back on North Penn. Or you can use Villa and cut back over. You can take Villa to 63rd. There's just all kinds of ways to access out of the site. Our frontage on Penn is obviously limited and not a safe place to put a driveway, so we didn't put one in. A single access off of Northwest Highway, the size that we're proposing will allow the volume of traffic we anticipate to come through there. And so I think the argument of that these people are going to use that driveway, I mean, that can be solved simply by them closing their driveway off on 50th Street. It's a private parking lot. They can do that. They can post signs, private property, not for cut-through. It can be policed. There is only one sign on that property now that suggests that this is private and through traffic is not permitted, and it's over on Barnes, the farthest away location from the light. So there are things as a private property owner that you can do to do that, but the fact that somebody at some point in time designed a signal, put it in a private driveway, you're going to have to expect public traffic using that. It happens at Chesapeake and Western. It happens on the private drive we put for Love's headquarters, and you just expect it. But in this case, it could be prohibited, it could be limited or eliminated by the owner of the property. So we've addressed this using public access. It does not adversely impact any of the streets serving this site with the additional traffic we're proposing. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
JJ, can you or traffic tell me why we have a TE3 there, what the thinking was behind that?
I believe the intent of that TE was to pull the entrance back as far away as possible from the entrance for the intersection of Penn. For individuals that want to go north on Penn, have to come out and cross 4 lanes of traffic to get in the left lane.
Randy, you're standing up. Is there something else?
The TE is probably my fault. It's for the reasons JJ mentioned. I know Mr. Johnson labeled it a lot of different ways to get from the site, but none of those are the easiest or probably the most likely way people will exit this site trying to go north. They will try to cut across those 3 or 4 lanes of traffic on Northwest Expressway and get in that left turn lane. It's a guideline in the comprehensive plan to protect the functional area of intersections. That's for efficiency and safety's sake. That's where you're most likely to have an accident. So by moving that driveway further west, past where the northbound turn lane begins on the Northwest Expressway, you're out of the functional area and you're removing another conflict point at that intersection by doing that. We just feel it's much safer to do that. It's at your discretion. I mean, the decel lane, yes, will be pushed farther back behind those homes, but there's 40 to 50 feet of right-of-way from the edge of road to those homes. So there's plenty of room to put a decel lane there that will not impact those homes very much.
It's the same discussion we had at Memorial and Northwestern, flipping it, coming off from the north and trying to go south, crossing 4 lanes, and trying to move that off-ramp further to the west, and at the same time not allowing St. Anthony's to have an entrance off of Memorial. which would have had them cutting across 4 lanes of traffic in a matter of about 100 feet.
So that's why we wanted to push as far west as possible.
Randy, your comment is well taken, but when I looked at this, and I had this conversation with David about if you're going to come out on this development and you're going into the Northwest Expressway, no matter if you're 50 feet to the west or if you're right there, it's going to be a white knuckle drive to get across 4 lanes to turn left on Penn.
Ideally, you wouldn't have the driveway there, but we realize that's not realistic.
You're not going to make it unless it's midnight and, nobody's on the road.
But moving it as far west as possible is the safest alternative.
No, I understand, but I just think that it's going to be impossible. They're going to have to turn right and then turn right and just...
It won't stop people from trying.
We hope...
Well, Bob, I watch them doing exactly what you're describing at Memorial and Northwestern all the time. Any time of day, they're cutting. They're doing it. That's what I'm saying. They're stopping traffic.
And
They're forcing their way across. So it's a problem.
We denied that, remember, long ago, for that reason.
Well, we did what we could to mitigate, which wasn't enough.
Tim, would it be possible to angle the exit side of the Northwest Expressway access to force it east so that we diminish as much as humanly possible the insanity that people are willing to resort to?
We could do that. I think, we're going a lot of depth into a schematic site plan at this point, and although this is what we'd like to see happen, if it's not that
Not
user,
chiseled in stone yet.
it's not exactly. And so we understand the concern. I think we would, from a safety standpoint, depending on where that drive ends up, we did seek several years ago when we were looking at the site before, we did seek tentative approval from ODOT to place that there. Now, my understanding is Oklahoma City has that right of approval. And so the concern I would have is that we would be pushing it west. We would be in a position of having to ask those neighbors for permission.
I'm not crazy about that idea. There may be a lot of right-of-way. There may be a lot of, grass there now, but I wouldn't like to see that replaced with a decel lane, in those people's backyards. I don't like that alternative at all, so.
And I think, when we do come in with our design plan, we'd be happy to sit down with the staff and make sure that it's Randy and Stuart Chai's office to make sure we're doing the right thing.
If we get approval and get there, I'd like to be at those meetings.
Yeah, so we'd like to hear about that directly as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there anybody else to be heard today?
Yes, Mr. Buckley, who wrote our letter. Sir, if you give us your name and address for the record, please.
Thank you very much. My name is Owen Buckley. I am the managing member of Legacy Investors, LLC. We are a firm based out of Kansas City, Missouri, 4705 Central, Kansas City, Missouri.
Thank you.
And I appreciate very much the opportunity to be here today. I want to make it very clear that we have nothing against development and progress and the developer. Our concern is regarding the rights of our ownership group, the tenants, and the clients and customers that visit our office tenants. We own the property just south of the subject property that we're discussing today. It's called Penn Park Office Complex. And I have written you a letter, and so I won't go over all that to save time. I trust you have read it. And Mr. Todd Butler with Traffic Engineer Consultants is here, too, if you would like to ask him questions later on. I think that the fact, the biggest thing that we're concerned about is that people are people, and they're going to use our entrance and our parking lot as a de facto ingress and egress into this project. And I'd like to see the project move forward somehow, figure out how we can fix that. we're worried about people cutting through the parking lot. If you go to Google Earth right now, you can see it where people do it right now. You can see our black asphalt, and you can kind of see a little trail where they do it. In fact, today I was standing there. We went over there. We were hoping to do some renovations with the complex, and afterwards I was meeting with the property manager and the leasing agent. We were literally standing outside. I think it was about 100 degrees, by the way, and so we were kind of trying to hurry the conversation. And I said to Nancy Peace, our property manager, do you think that's an issue with people driving through, and then do they do it? She said, oh yeah, they do it all the time. And she says, I don't think it's an issue right now at this level. And right as she was saying that, she said, watch this car pulling in right now. And they were coming off the traffic signal, and sure enough, they went right through our property and jumped onto 50th. And right as they were doing that, somebody was coming off 50th. Literally, we stood there for 2 minutes and saw that happen. So it's going to happen. What concerns us is a project like this will generate somewhere in the 3,000 to 4,000 trips per day. And our consultant that we listen to thinks that as much as 35% of that could be using our parking lot as a de facto ingress-egress. I mean, if you're coming from the south and you want to get into a coffee shop or a happy hour or a fitness center, the first couple times you may read the sign and go, okay, I'm supposed to turn on 47th and go by the synagogue. But after you make that kind of your spot, you're going to figure out, because you're just, people are people, they're going to figure out that way to kind of sneak through that parking lot. And we're worried about the queue for people getting into that left turn lane. For example, if they're on their way to work in the morning, 20,000 cars on Penn south of Northwest Expressway. So to give you an example, there's 14,000 to 16,000 cars, depending where you measure, north on Penn by the mall. So a lot of cars between Interstate 44 and Northwest Expressway. Assume half of those or whatever are heading north and could be headed into this project. How do they get in? They're going to cut through our property. We're concerned about that. We're concerned, we have no opposition to the Northwest Expressway right in, right out. We think that's a good idea. But we also know that at certain points of the day, or some drivers are aggressive, some of us aren't aggressive, and I can just see, hey, honey, let's not try to go over 4 lanes. Let's just go out through our parking lot. We're just concerned about that. We feel that's one of the, each property comes with a collection of rights and things that make the property attractive. It factors into the pricing and whatnot, and we think our access and our parking is a quite enjoyment, if you will, that we would like to continue to use. We are flexible. We are open-minded to solutions. We don't want to be adverse. And one thing, last thing I do want to say, because I feel like it needs to be said, although it shouldn't be pertinent or material, but the developer was speaking with one of our people from our group, and he felt like maybe there was a little sour grapes going on with our group, because we also bidded for the Chesapeake property, which is the property we're discussing today, and we lost. And that's fine. I mean, we bought this property a year ago. The Chesapeake property wasn't for sale at that time. We didn't know if it would be. We heard it would be. In fact, it took a long time for them to put it on the market. We knew when we bought the property that even if it did come for sale, that we might not be the winner, so to speak. We knew that it wasn't zoned. We knew that we didn't have access to Northwest Expressway. We didn't know if tenants would even pay the kind of rental rates that we would need. But we're real estate people, so we're always looking at options. And yes, we looked at the options of combining these two pieces of property, which probably is the right way to do it, to solve the problem. But we don't feel that our property should take on the burden, while it's been there for years, to benefit the property next door. We feel like they need to solve their own issues and make sure that we don't have unsafe situations happening in our parking lot with cars driving through it and stacking, and our people not being able to get out at 5 o'clock in the evening or get in at 8 in the morning. So
thank you.
Really, really appreciate the time. Thank you.
Well, I do think that there are some things that the property owner could do themselves. Similar problem exists in parking lots. You have people utilizing the parking lot that may not have the right to be there. So what do? You properly sign it to notify the public that you tow cars. Here, as Tim said, there's only one sign in all their access points into their property that says that it's private property and not meant for a through street. You could sign it better. You could block certain access points to prohibit or limit that ability if that is a concern, which we would support, whatever effort they might have. But we do think that, this zoning case should stand on its own merits. We think that the merits are something that should be approved. We think it's a great site, a great plan, and one that respects the traffic that is currently operating on Northwest Highway and Penn as best that we can. So we would ask for your approval.
Commissioners, discussion?
The issue of the traffic lights that go into the 50 Penn Place parking lot and the parking lot at Penn Park, there's no question it's a weird deal and it's a problem and so on. But to look at what we're looking at, which is this piece of property and what's appropriate for it, I don't think there's any question in my mind that it's a commercial tract and that it needs to be developed commercially. I think that they have done the best that they can do to deal with their traffic issues. Penn and Northwest Expressway is a difficult intersection on all four of its corners. It's just weird. You can't cross it in any direction because there are medians. And, I am going to move for approval.
Okay, we have
We would ask that the TE3 be deleted.
With the deletion of TE3. And I would very much like to be involved in the solution to the Cell Lane and how we're going to deal with Northwest Expressway.
Okay.
Your second includes the deletion of TE3? Okay. We have a motion and a second to approve item 7, deleting TE3. Cast your votes. That's approved.
Thank you.
Item 8 is SPUD 904 to rezone 5301 South Penny Road from AA to SPUD 904.
Is the applicant here?
Commissioners, my name is Caleb Lundy. I'm the applicant.
And your address, please.
My home address is 897 Silver Chase Drive in Choctaw.
Thank you. And this is a request for a lot split to build a home?
I'm sorry?
This is a request for a lot split to build a home, is that correct?
Yes. This is my father's property, and we're trying to rezone the property into two and a half acre lots. I'm going to build on the other side of the property is the plan.
Okay, commissioners, no one has signed up.
I've looked at this, and there's very little traffic down at that end of Henny Road, and I don't have a problem with it, and I'd recommend to approve the application.
We have a motion and a second to approve item 8. Cast your votes. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Item 9 is case SPUD 905 to rezone 3710 Northwestern from C3 to SPUD 905.
The applicant here? You're up.
I'm sorry I can't stand up, but the old legs don't work anymore. I just want to take just a minute first. My daughter usually speaks for me because she's my manager, and she can handle things a lot better than I can now. I hit the age 91 last month, and it's kind of hard to get around anymore. But on this location of the furniture store, I had that store for 50 years. I had furniture in all the 6 buildings, and then I had to close it. I retired about a year ago, and I've got all the buildings are rented now except this one building, and we'd like to put a cafe in. Oklahoma City is always needing new businesses, and and new jobs, and now's the opportunity to really get a nice little cafe started. This is Mark Backel, and he's had a lot of experience in the restaurant business. He managed 3 of those Hooters stores down in Dallas, but now he wouldn't hire the waitresses like they'd hire, but he'd have a real nice cafe opened up there, and this would be my last building to rent, and I'd like to see it develop there. That's an old part of town. That section of land was Oklahoma City Golf and Country Club before we opened up the furniture store there. And they moved out in 1935, and then the property was built in 1936, so it's real old property. But we've kept it up and remodeled it, and we're adding new parking in the next month or so we'll have plenty of parking. But if there's anything else, I'd like for my daughter to handle it, because she knows more about it, handle things like that than I do.
And for the record, you are Frank Bruno.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Frank Bruno. Yeah.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wants to be heard on this matter today?
No one signed up.
I'm going to move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve item 9. Cast your votes, and it's approved. You're approved. Already approved? Yeah. Already.
Okay. Item 10 is case C 6824, the final plat of Palermo Place, Section 3.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Chris Anderson with SMC Consulting Engineers, representing the developer. We've read the staff report and agree with the TEs, and we just request approval of the plat this afternoon.
Well, no one signed up, and I can't wait to see you at Christmas. We have a motion and a second to approve item 10. Cast your votes, and it's approved.
Thank you.
Item 11 is ABC 860 for an ABC 2 overlay of the C4 district located at 1215 Northwestern Avenue.
Hello, my name is Cheyenne Keppel. I'm the applicant. So I applied for an ABC 2 here to make this site more attractive to a restaurant tenant. I applied for the SBUD on 13th and Classen maybe a couple months ago. Right down the street. I just purchased this property at this one is 1215 Northwestern. And so basically, I'm just trying to make this a little more attractive to a restaurant tenant, trying to develop this area more to get more people down. Caddy Corner across the street, Fat Dog Kitchen and Bar just opened. They're doing okay, and so basically, it's kind of where I'm at today.
Any commissioners? No.
Where is your parking?
My parking is on the south side. So, yeah, south side of the building, and I have a little bit on the north side as well.
Oh, okay.
There's a couple lots behind it I'm going to try to purchase, and then the property to the north, the attorney that has that piece of land in between the land I have that just got approved. Now I'm trying to buy some of that to kind of park the area.
Any protest?
No protest.
I move approval.
A motion and a second to approve item 11. Cast your votes, and that's approved.
And item 12 is CE 935. It's an application to close the alley that extends from Northwestern between 11th and 12th Street.
Again, no one signed up.
I move approval.
Is any portion of that alleyway in use, or is it opened at all?
No, it's basically just stopped. It's not being used at all. Just kind of parking, basically. People are kind of parking on it, driving over it. It's already ended, basically.
I've got this puzzled look on my face because we fairly recently looked at an office development a little further north at that very weird intersection there. But we're not concerned about this interfering with that in any way, shape, or form. Okay.
We have a motion and a second to approve item 12. Cast your votes, and you're approved there.
Item 13 is ABC 859 for an ABC2 overlay of C4 district located at 1101 Northwest 11th Street.
This building here, same scenario as the last one. I have a tenant, James Vu, that owns La Braza down the street at the Camps building. Wanted to put a concept in here, so it's contingent basically on the ABC2. So I'm here doing this to kind of seal the deal for him and I.
Is this going to be a Mexican food restaurant?
Yes, taqueria, basically just tacos, just Mexican street tacos.
I'm all in favor of one of those. I move approval.
No. Do we have a second? We have a motion and a second to approve item 13. Cast your votes, and that's approved. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Item 14 is ABC 861 for an ABC3 overlay of the I-2 district located at 8200 Southwest 3rd.
Give us your name and address, please.
I'm Larry Jenkins,
Okay. And your address?
10808 South Bryant, Oklahoma City.
Okay, thank you.
I'm asking for a ABC 3 alcoholic beverage club with overlay of 1-2 at 8200 Southwest 3rd Street, Oklahoma City.
No one signed up, commissioners?
Yeah, I'll second.
We have a motion and a second to approve item 14. Cast your votes, and it's approved. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 15 is CPA 2016-3. This is a consideration of a comprehensive plan amendment that's lifting the heavy industrial layer over the urban low-intensity area located east of Classen and south of Wilshire. And Randy Yentz is here to provide a presentation to the commission.
Thank you. Randy Yentz with the Planning Department. Once again, we're here to amend the comp plan. We'll run through this real quick for you. This one is, I hate to steal David's words, but this one is unique because it is closer to the inner core of Oklahoma City, not out on the fringe where you typically see these type things. The request today is to remove the heavy industrial layer and designate the urban low-intensity land use on a piece of property as described on Classen and Wilshire Boulevard. There is an associate application with it. You don't see that on today's agenda. To be on the next agenda, the July 14th, but it's for a PUD to develop roughly 26 acres of this area, by far and away the largest undeveloped portion of this subject area that you see here. To give you a little perspective of where it is in the city, it's right there in the middle next to Nichols Hills, just on the east edge. Closer up view, it's sandwiched in between Classen and the BNSF rail line. North 67th Street and just south of Wilshire Boulevard. It's currently designated as heavy industrial. There's a mix of land uses there. Some of it's undeveloped. There are some office uses, some industrial uses, and still some single-family residents there. The zoning is a mix as well, I-2, I-1, office, residential, and then a couple of spuds and PUDs. It's roughly 78 acres in size, and the request is to change it to urban low intensity. The LUDA, the heavy industrial LUDA, is intended to accommodate those uses that are difficult to integrate with less intense uses. And as such, the only appropriate things that we see there are manufacturing, warehousing, distribution centers, some office and flex space, things like that, but not residential. The proposed use is urban low. You see this quite a bit. This is the areas of town that are the least intensely developed that still receive all the urban services. So they still have water, sewer, fire, and police at a certain response time. So when we designated this heavy industrial in the comp plan, we looked at three things. One was the existing industrial zoning. So this area, as I said, was a mix, but if you look at the percentages currently, it's 80% of the area is zoned I-2. If you include I-1, it's almost 85% is zoned for industrial uses. A little bit of residential and a little bit of office mixed in as well. Now, if the PUD is approved, it will change that dramatically because that 24 acres is a third of this subject area. The character of the area is a mix because there's so much undeveloped and because of all the remaining residential that's in there and the office and things. But if you look at the broader area, you have Nichols Hills directly to the west, which is all single family. Almost directly south is the Chesapeake campus, and then the Classen Curve and Whole Foods retail areas that are opening up there. And then a bunch of undeveloped land east of the railroad tracks until you get to a lot more industrial along the highway. So. Then the other thing we looked at was its proximity to highway and rail access. It's actually has good access to both 44 and 235. It's adjacent to the railroad. Now, its access may be questionable. The ability to get a spur there is probably somewhat limited because of other spurs in the area and the railroad's reluctance to keep issuing those. According to the applicant, they would not be able to get one there. And I don't necessarily disagree with that. So while it's adjacent to it, may not have access to that rail. Next slide. When we consider designating an urban load, typically what we go through is, are there urban services available? And on the fringe of the city, that's a much bigger deal. Here it's completely served. It's been served for years. It's got urban service levels for fire and police. And then it's fully served by sewer and water. As far as compatibility, is urban low compatible with the adjacent land uses? Well, urban low is already there right across Classen from this. So basically what we'd be doing is moving that edge over. So it is compatible because of the urban medium to the south, and urban low are compatible, and it's still compatible with the industrial. As the industrial were to develop east, we would need to consider this site-specific development to make sure it's compatible with anything that develops on the other side. The transportation system, Classen Boulevard is a 4-lane divided minor arterial. Wilshire is a 4-lane major arterial. Both streets are appropriate for urban low uses. Other transportation in the area, transit service exists on Western, which is roughly 700 feet to the west. The comprehensive plan includes future TOD developments at Western and Britain and 63rd and the railroad. And what that means is we anticipate there being a mix of uses there, a high intensity with residential, office space, and things of that nature in retail. And Classen Boulevard is a bike route. So in summary, for water, sewer, and fire, it's definitely a green light. Compatibility, we feel it is compatible with the surrounding land uses. The transportation system is adequate to change it to urban low. It is contiguous to other urban low intensity LUDAs to the west. And by moving that line all the way over to the railroad, we felt that it didn't fragment the existing HI that would still be there. So we recommended adopting the resolution amending the comprehensive plan, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Commissioners, any questions of Randy?
I have a question. My staff report says that the heavy industrial layer was applied to the subject area due to its existing I-2 zoning, proximity to rail and highway, and because a large portion of the area is developed with industrial and outdoor storage uses. So one question that I have about that is, I mean, was it just sort of this looks industrial to us, so that's good? Or was there some actual thought put into or decision made that, this is one of those places we're always talking about how we don't have enough industrial land for big uses, and maybe we ought to preserve this? I mean, are we giving up something here by doing this?
Giving up seems a bit strong, but yes, we are. I mean, that is a large section of, or a large acreage of undeveloped land that we, when we designated it that, thought it would probably go industrial. It's been undeveloped for a long time and been zoned industrial for a long time, and it hasn't developed. So it has since been acquired by this individual. They have a different plan for it. We think that plan also would work, so that is why we...
I guess what I'm asking you is, do we have a strong feeling that this ought to be reserved in some way?
We don't, it's 24 acres, which is large for this subject site, but for a large manufacturing site, that is not very, very substantial. So our employment reserve covers areas of large tracts that we think are being held back for larger manufacturers or employment centers. The heavy industrial did not necessarily anticipate holding property for that.
I might want to add to that response, too, is that If a heavy industrial use did come in, a large manufacturing facility, the comprehensive plan probably would have required us to look at that as a SPUD because it would have tripped some of our compatibility triggers. Because this is right on the edge. It is on a corridor that has a lot of small-scale, light industrial and office uses. So it's really the character of it is more consistent with an industrialized urban low-intensity area than it is a heavy industrial area. We felt the heavy industrial activities would be more suitable to the east side of the railroad tracks where larger parcels of land were available for those large-scale heavy industrial uses. So this little sliver could have developed as an industrial office park or something with smaller uses. Right now, that's not the proposal on the table, but that probably would have been the most agreeable type of development under the heavy industrial classification.
Okay. And I note that the applicant initially was only seeking 26 acres, but we've now increased that 3 times.
Anytime we get an application, we look at what the request is and then start looking at the natural boundaries of what should be included. By changing that 26 acres, everything else on the west side of the railroad tracks probably then begins to change in character over time. So we felt it was appropriate to bring it all the way and to prevent fragmenting the HI.
Okay. Does anybody else have anything?
Anyone else?
I'm going to move for approval.
And second, and I want to make a comment, how much I appreciate the analysis of changing the comprehensive plan, which in every event should be done with the utmost care and consideration of the whole thing. And I second, if it hadn't been seconded already.
And the motion is approval of the map amendment to the comp plan specifically. Cast your votes, and that's approved.
Item number 16 is an ordinance set for public hearing and a recommendation that amends Chapter 3, the Sign Code, and Chapter 59, the Zoning and Planning Code pertaining to the Bricktown Core Development District. And Sarah Welch is here to provide a presentation on that.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Sarah Welch, Planning Department. With me again today is Lisa Chronister, who manages our current Planning and Urban Design Division, and also Michael Philbrick, who is the staff to our Bricktown Urban Design Committee. We're here today with a proposed ordinance. We introduced it last time. We're asking for a recommendation today. This would amend Chapters 3 and Chapters 59 of our municipal code. Chapter 3 is, first before I begin, let me show you the subject area. The subject area affects only the BC, which is the Bricktown Core Development District. This is an existing design district. The ordinance I'm talking about today is an update to that. Go ahead. Some background on this. This proposed ordinance has been through our Bricktown Urban Design Committee several times, beginning in 2014. It was initially began to address topics that staff and applicants realized or identified as they were going through approval process. And since then, and after that began in 2015, this body and also the City Council adopted the Downtown Development Framework. So we were able to incorporate a lot of the recommendations of that document into this ordinance you see here. The Bricktown Urban Design Committee has recommended approval of the ordinance, and you all have seen it in both an Urban Development Committee meeting and introduced here in Planning Commission. The first change is to Chapter 3, which involves signs only in the BC district. Currently, the ordinance doesn't cover all types of signs you may find in Bricktown. We are requesting to move all of the sign regulations into our sign code. It talks about signs that are prohibited, the number of signs, the surface area of signs that you can have. It talks about EMD signs, temporary signs, and then adds sign standards for residential uses. That's not something we have today. As we amend Chapter 59, which is the Planning and Zoning Code, there are some administrative changes we're recommending. One of them, probably the biggest one, is that right now the Bricktown Urban Committee has 5 members. We are recommending to take that to 7. It also amends the bulk regulations. Those are things like height, setbacks, and that type of thing. We are, in addition to making some amendments to the bulk regulations, we are also requesting to separate Bricktown into 2 sub-districts, East Bricktown and West Bricktown, and those bulk regulations are affected by which sub-district you're in. There are several changes to development regulations we're requesting to make. Those are Those come a lot out of the downtown development framework and talk about building frontage, parking, landscaping, building materials, that type of thing. And then we are requesting to change some of the use regulations. Specifically, we're deleting the artistic graphics use. That's something specific just to Bricktown. We are adding murals as a conditional use. Those would need to go to the Arts Commission before the Bricktown Urban Design Committee. And then we are adding antennas as a conditional use. That's the same citywide. The Bricktown is just the one district where that was omitted. And then we're requesting to change the regulations for bars and taverns. Right now, bars and taverns are permitted by use. For right now, we're proposing to add the ABC3 overlay. That's our current avenue for bars and taverns citywide. We're requesting to add Bricktown into that process. And then we also have design guidelines. This is a design district, and staff and the Bricktown Design Committee look at guidelines when they are making decisions about proposals. And so there are several amendments to the design guidelines adapted again from the DDF, the Downtown Development Framework, and they involve the things like the development pattern to consider pedestrian circulation and amenities, to consider parking and vehicular access on the streets, fences, trash rooms, and then historic signage. One addition this time around is that there are changes proposed for building design, treatments, and materials, and this ordinance would allow staff and the committee to consider new construction versus historic building, before the guidelines weren't split out. So if you're building something new like Brickopolis or renovating something like the Plow building, you may have the same guidelines. This will separate that out and give more guidance. Right now, we're asking for your recommendation. I do want to say that per Dan Brummett's request, we'll be taking the sign portion, we'll be separating that out from the rest of it, and as we move forward. But today we're asking for your recommendation of approval on the ordinance for Bricktown. I'm here to answer any questions, as is Lisa and Michael.
Commissioners, questions?
I assume the Bricktown Committee has approved this.
They have.
So therefore, I recommend the approval of the ordinance.
We have a motion and a second to approve item 16. Cast your votes. And that's approved.
Thank you.
Let's go back to item 7 and the Taft Stadium question and take that up now. Oh, item 6, I'm sorry. Sorry to keep you waiting.
I apologize, I was reading your item for the ABC ordinance. So, I don't know how you want to start. We conferred, and I had one question back, I guess, to the commissioners. If we could limit this to sporting events and completely exclude entertainment events, would that give more comfort to people on the commission, or do we need to look strictly at soccer?
Adult sporting events.
School events are completely off the table. We have absolutely no intention of ever asking to serve alcohol at a school event.
I hate the delay. I appreciate the idea, but the definition of sporting events, I mean, I don't know. I'd really like to look at this at the next meeting and kind of contemplate it rather than juggle a definition today. I'm not comfortable with actually the whole concept, the lessee, the school board, maps for kids. I mean, you know, this whole concept, I've just got to get my arms around this application. And sporting events encompasses not energy. You know, it's like we don't have gladiators anymore, but, you know, sporting events.
It talks about the extreme sporting
I don't know.
events,
I appreciate that, but I'd like to just think about it.
I'd like to see something in black and white from the school board.
They've got that.
We have the authorization, it should be, I assume in the packet, it's in the packet that we submitted, that the authorization, there was a vote at a school board meeting that specifically authorized the application for this PUD.
So this application was authorized by the school board, so
I
if we
understand.
narrow it, the school board's not going to object.
And because we would have to, at some level, perhaps go back to the school board and go through their process again, we are not interested in delaying. Obviously, we want to answer your concerns. I wanted to ask about sporting events, but soccer-related events would be fine with us. If that would help us to satisfy your concerns today and to put this to rest so that you can move on, that would be great.
Okay, but here's a question. When does Energy play? When's their first game?
They've started.
We've been playing. We're about halfway or more through the season.
Okay.
We'll play through
All right.
September and a little in October.
And at those Energy games, are you selling beer?
Yes.
By special permit?
That's what I'm saying. Keep on with that. I'm not ready to say yay or nay or whatever. Let me contemplate sporting events, what that means, and how broad that definition is.
She's saying that if we want to limit it to soccer, they're okay with that.
Well,
How about like professional football?
yeah. Well, Triple A something or other,
Why don't we
She's saying they're okay with professional soccer, so that's fine with me. And I think that's what we're all
Make
saying
that
we're
your
okay
motion.
with, if they're going to continue to make the use of it that they're making now.
I think there's too much up in the air for me to vote on this today positively, and I think we need to delay it for 2 weeks.
If we take until the 14th of July, you'll still be able to make your city council hearing, so I think maybe
Wait a minute, they're going to council on the 19th.
of July, I thought.
Correct.
Yeah, but we don't meet,
On the 14th. We meet on the 14th.
I won't be here, so. I have to be out of town, so I'm just, we got 8. I think we ought to vote it. I'll make a motion, and we'll just vote to go.
Approve it for soccer only?
We all said we'd approve it for soccer. I don't get where we are now.
Mr. Covey, can I have my TEs back, please?
But you've got to, okay, there's another thing, the sign issue, they've got to leave.
There's no sign,
The
it's out.
signage is off.
It's out.
Let me tell you, we have agreed to amend TE 9 to read that any new signage shall require review and approval of a specific plan by the Planning Commission. So, and editorially, I will just tell you now that that is not intended in any way, shape, or form to hold out hope that you're going to get more signage.
I understand that.
Okay, so we're going to add a new TE 11 to read, beverages containing alcohol shall be limited to beer and wine, and a new TE 12 to read, beer and wine sales shall be incidental/accessory to, and we're going to say professional soccer events.
We were hoping to just say operations as opposed to events, just in case there was like a celebration the day after, like we were to win the whole league. We just don't want to get into, so the operations, if that would be okay, just to make sure that we didn't run afoul of anything.
I would think events would cover that, frankly. We're not saying games. And the area depicted on the site plan. Beer and wine sales shall be specifically prohibited during all school events.
What about parking lots?
The parking lot is not included in the application.
Yes.
And so the Energy wins their league like Cleveland did, and then the events after that, when you win the league, whoopee. It's,
I'm less concerned about the Energy's events personally than I am about a concert venue. That's always been my fear with respect to this site. I'll second Janice's motion. Was that a motion, Janice?
That was a motion.
Did you have anything else to add?
I don't think so. JJ, help me out here. Was there anything else that we agreed to? I thought it did come down to that.
Okay, we have a motion with a second, as amended by the TEs Janice read, for approval. Cast your votes. It has passed. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we are back on item number 17. This is an ordinance set for public hearing and a recommendation to amend Chapter 59 of the Planning and Zoning Code. This is adopting regulations for the Oklahoma Capitol Medical Center Improvement Zoning District. JJ?
This is just a bit of a housekeeping item. Currently, the city has a contract with the state to provide zoning enforcement for the Capitol Medical Zoning District. This ordinance will codify those regulations into Chapter 59, the city's zoning ordinance, so we can effectively prosecute those in municipal court.
I can't wait to vote in favor of this one. I move that we approve this recommendation.
This is a motion to recommend approval of the ordinance to the City Council. Cast your votes. Jim, you want to? There we go. It's approved.
And item number 18 is another ordinance. This is an introduction, and to set this ordinance for public hearing on July 14th. This is amending Chapter 59 pertaining to the alcoholic beverage consumption zoning overlay districts. And Randy Ince is here to explain it.
Randy Ince, again, with the Planning Department. We've talked about this before. As we begin to talk about the ABC regulations, we met with Planning Commission several times. We've met with the Police Department. We've met with Development Services staff. We've met with people in the industry, and what you're going to see before you is what came out of those meetings and the recommendations that we've pulled together from that. What we'll look at today is the current processes, the issues that we've kind of discovered along the way, and then the proposed changes to solve those issues, and then the next steps from there. Currently, in the current process, it's kind of a two-step process. So what we're talking about today is ABC 1s and 2s, which are restaurants with alcohol, different levels of alcohol, and then ABC 3s, which are a bar and tavern. What separates the two is how much money or how much of the business is conducted on food sales. So if you're over 50% food sales, you're considered a restaurant. If you're a bar and tavern, you're not required to have food sales. But it's a two-step process. The first step is you have to have the zoning district in place that includes that use unit, so a restaurant with alcohol use unit or a drinking establishment use unit, as the case may be. And then you have to come and apply for an ABC 1, 2, or 3 overlay. So it's an additional zoning overlay that is required. It's $1,500 to $1,600, and it requires a recommendation by a Planning Commission and approval from City Council, and it generally adds about 100 days to the process for people. We looked at the historic data, so for the last 5 years, from 2010 to 2015, the overwhelming majority of the applications were for ABC2s, which is a restaurant with a full bar. Almost 90% were for restaurants with some sort of alcohol use. Of those 114 applications, only 2 were denied, all the rest were approved. And the average length of time that it took for that was 113 days to get that approval. The issues that kind of came up, the why we were here today, the first one being overlays don't expire. They stay with the land. You've talked about this several times. You've talked about it today, that that's a concern. So once established, an ABC stays with the property. The Oklahoma City Police Department, particularly with ABC 3s, expressed that as a concern because they would like the ability to remove that if there's a problem property. It's one more tool they get to use to address a problem within our community. The second issue is that it can discourage the kind of lengthy and unknown nature of our process, can discourage restaurants from locating in Oklahoma City. This is particular to ABC 1s and 2s. That national chains kind of have a standard process they go through, and they have an expectation, and anything that's out of the ordinary for them causes them concern. It's also a big issue for mom and pop local shops who aren't familiar with the process, and this is extra time and money that they may not have anticipated when they started this process. We came to the realization that this is a problem for Oklahoma City because we looked at our peer cities, and that's the largest cities in Oklahoma City we looked at, and we also looked at several cities nationally that we commonly compare ourselves to. And what we found when we looked at them is that Oklahoma City is the only city of all the ones we looked at that used the overlay to regulate where alcohol consumption is done. All the other cities either do it by right, so in the zoning district it's allowed with certain districts, or by special permit. So as being unique to Oklahoma City, we saw that kind of as an issue, that we were the only ones using that overlay. We also, the lengthy process. It is 100-plus days to get this done, and this is in addition to the 8 or 9 other processes they have to go through with the state and the county and the city to get a license to sell alcohol. So this was one more step we were added. And at the time we started this process, we went, well, what if they applied today, which was in May? Go ahead. Well, if they had applied May 11th, by the time they got through the process and were able to open their doors, it's an extra 144 days that we were adding to their process. Just the city? Just the overlay process, yeah. Okay. So the proposed changes we came up with were for eating establishments with limited alcohol, so that's Low Point beer and wine. I think of Buffalo Wild Wings as the example I always like to give. For the zoning districts in which it is a permitted use, to change it from an ABC overlay to a permitted use. So in those zoning districts, you would not require any extra zoning. You just go apply for your permits. For the eating establishment sit-down alcohol permitted, which is a full bar at Chili's or Chili's, the districts that allow that use, it would be a conditional use. So you see the districts there as most of the commercial and industrial uses, or use units, or districts, zoning districts. The conditions we included, the intent of the conditions were to protect residential from any adverse impacts when they're adjacent to C3 zoning. So if there's outdoor seating being used between 11 p.m. and 8 a.m., it has to be at least 100 feet from the nearest property line of any residential use. And then the lighting has to be directed away from the adjacent properties. If an applicant couldn't meet those conditions, they can apply for a special permit and show Planning Commission and City Council how they're going to address that concern then. For an ABC3 use, we're proposing going from the ABC overlay to a special permit. So this is just for bars and taverns. So it's still a two-step process for a bar or tavern. They have to have that use unit allowed, and then they have to come apply for a special permit. The advantage of the special permit is, one, it can be revoked. So if the use is ever declared a nuisance, there's a process for which that is done, already included in the code. Or if the state revokes the operator's license, then the special permit could be revoked. And anytime somebody wanted to begin that use again, they'd have to come back through and get approved. The special permit can also expire. So if for a period of 12 months, they haven't paid their taxes or they haven't renewed their license, or that the sale or consumption of alcoholic beverages ceases there, it goes away. So if somebody were to want to reopen after that 12 months, they have to then, therefore, come back through and get another permit. There are specific conditions for special permits. They have to conform to the comprehensive plan, not adversely affect neighboring properties. They have to have account for the traffic and the pedestrian facilities. They have to have adequate public facilities, and they have to have access to a street with adequate right-of-way. Specific conditions can be made on special permits regarding location design and operations to assure safety and prevent a nuisance. There's a caveat there that the city cannot be more restrictive than the state, so when it comes to alcohol-related issues. So we are somewhat limited. We can't get too much into the operations of a restaurant or a bar serving alcohol. So there are limits that are imposed upon us. The next steps, this is the introduction today. The actual hearing will be July 14th, and then in August and September it'll go through approval with City Council, provided you recommend it for approval. Yes, sir. I'm sorry, what? The state has nothing to do with our approval of ABCs. We just have to conform to the ABC, and our legal staff has reviewed it and feels that as proposed it does.
The question, I guess, that I have the most concern about is the ABC2 section. If we're going to turn that basically into a conditional use, the question is whether the conditions that if you have outdoor seating, you have to be 100 feet away from a residential area, and you have to keep your lighting directed away from residential areas. Whether that's sufficient control to say, and if you meet those conditions, you can have it as of right. I mean, is that really all that we care about?
Wasn't there, Janice, another list of items about it affected the neighborhood? There was is this ABC 3 you're talking about?
No, 2.
2?
I mean, any restaurant that serves alcohol, are those really the only conditions we care about?
Pat, your microphone.
They have to meet the ordinance as well as the
Well, it has to be zoned, but, you know,
requirements we put in it,
it has to be...
as far as lighting, noise.
Oh, sure, yeah. But, you know, in our wards, you know, there's so much older property that, you know, would fall into these categories that's very near to residential areas. And so, I mean, maybe it is enough. Maybe it's all we care about, but I don't know.
I can say, I mean, I'm in favor of this whole ordinance for all the reasons. For 10 or 12 years we've had to deal with ABC 1, 2, and 3 applications, and they run with the land, and this removes 1 and 2 from any of those considerations. If it's C1, 2, 3, 4 industrial, you can do it, provided that you meet these conditions. You know, ABC 3 is a special permit; it can expire. You know, and I like that. I don't know about, I mean, there's obviously noise, but ABC 1 and 2 are restaurant-oriented, you know, as opposed to bar-oriented, like that bar on 23rd Street where they were going to have music on the top, and we wanted that to be a PUD, and they went, no, we're going to serve alcohol until the cows come home. And that's going to be alcohol ABC 3 from now until forever. That's why I like this. It removes that permanence of a bar. The others are restaurants. I mean, restaurants can be loud, you know, like Chuck E. Cheese, or, you know, you can have just regular restaurants with beer and wine and whatever. But I think that when you have the food aspect of it being that conditional use, kind of tends to diminish the neighborhood effects. But I like what's going on. It's better than what we've had.
Well, it's 10 times better, I think. At least, you know, it's worth a try. We know what we've got's not working. I guess, you know, if nobody else, if that doesn't jump up and bite anybody else, I'll just take some time between now and July the 14th and see whether my concerns are more theoretical than concrete, and come back ready to talk to you about it at that time.
I just find it that we stand in such stark relief to our peers. Yes. that is just tells me that we're not in tune with how other cities, comparable cities, are handling this particular issue, and that we got to do something. I mean, it's not working for us, and it's clearly not working for the police or other parties.
Or applicants for that matter.
Clearly not for the applicants.
Zoning approved it.
They're finished.
Yes.
Well, we need a motion to set this for the 14th of July.
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to set item 18 for the 14th of July. Cast your votes, and that's approved.
Items 19 through 22 were continued or withdrawn, and item 23 is the election of Planning Commission officers.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to nominate John Yokel as chairman and Mike Hensley as vice chairman of the Planning Commission to serve for another term.
Aren't we asking too much? No, it seems like if they can ever get out of the job, they can't.
He should know. He's the poster child for that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Brian's no. Okay. Another year. Planning commissioners?
I have something I wanted to tell you all. I received an email today from Ryan Baker, who's the Associate Planner in the Office of Sustainability. And the city had applied for a grant from EPA for technical assistance to do an assessment of stormwater infrastructure and potential bicycle and pedestrian improvements in a square mile. It's part of a program called Greening America's Capitals. It's now called Greening America's Communities. So it's a square mile that includes Paseo, Central Park, Jefferson Park, and Edgemere. And we found out that we were granted the assistance, so we're going to be doing that. And I think that's a great thing. I just wanted to let you all know.
Good.
Tell Ryan Baker.
Yeah. Great. Planning Department, Aubrey? Development Services, JJ? Municipal Counselor? I see no citizens other than we. Motion to adjourn? And we're done.